The guard said nothing as they walked. Their scales caught the light from the crystal walls, throwing red and gold patterns across the floor. Dr. Owen Reed kept his breathing steady and his hands loose at his sides. He had learned long ago that showing fear never helped anyone, least of all a doctor walking into the unknown. The Imperial Palace stretched around him like the inside of a jewel. Everything here was built to remind visitors how small they were. The ceilings rose 50 feet overhead. The corridors could fit a cargo hauler with room to spare. Heat rose from vents in the floor, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Owen's shirt stuck to his back under his medical coat. He had been on Dravonis for exactly 4 hours. The summons had come 3 days ago, transmitted directly to his clinic on New Terra. Not a request. Not an invitation. A command from Empress Sirath herself. The message had been simple: come to the Imperial Palace. Bring your medical equipment. Tell no one why. Owen knew what happened to people who refused the Empress. He had heard the stories everyone heard. Sirath had ruled the Dravonian Empire for 800 years. She controlled 47 star systems. When she conquered the Kelvorian systems 2 centuries ago, she had burned 3 of their colony worlds as a lesson to the others. When her own council had suggested peace talks with the Terthan Federation, she had executed 2 advisors in front of the entire court. Humans had been in space for 200 years. The Draconians had been building empires for 12,000. Everyone in human space knew the math. If Sirath wanted humanity gone, humanity would be gone. The guard stopped at a door that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone. One of them pressed his clawed hand against a panel. The door split down the middle and swung inward without a sound. Beyond the door, the corridor changed. The crystal walls gave way to dark stone. Paintings lined the walls, each one showing battles and conquests. Owen recognized some of them from his history files. The fall of Kelvoria, the siege of Tarthan Prime, the breaking of the Sentinel fleet. In every painting, dragons filled the sky like storm clouds. They walked for another 10 minutes before reaching a second door. This one had symbols carved into it that Owen couldn't read. The guard stopped and turned to face him. One of them spoke for the first time since they had collected him from the landing platform. Beyond this door is the throne room. You will kneel when you enter. You will not speak unless the Empress addresses you directly. You will not look at her unless she commands it. Do you understand? Owen nodded. The guard studied him for a moment, then added something that sounded almost like concern. 4 doctors came before you. 2 are dead. 2 fled to the outer systems and will never return. Whatever is wrong with the Empress, no one has been able to fix it. The guard paused. Human medicine is different from ours. That is why you are here. But different does not mean better. Remember that. The doors opened. The throne room was dark except for pools of light that fell from gaps in the ceiling high above. The floor was polished stone that reflected those pools of light like still water. At the far end of the room, perhaps 200 feet away, something massive sat on a throne carved from red crystal. Owen walked forward. His footsteps echoed in the huge space. He could feel eyes on him but saw no one else in the room. When he reached the center of the room, he stopped and lowered himself to one knee. The stone was warm beneath him. So they send me a creature made of soft flesh to cure a dragon. How amusing. The voice came from everywhere at once. It was deep and carried an edge like broken glass. Owen kept his eyes on the floor. Stand up. Let me see what kind of fool thinks he can succeed where my own doctors have failed. Owen rose slowly. He lifted his gaze and saw her clearly for the first time. Empress Sirath was enormous. Even sitting, she towered over him. Her scales were deep crimson, darker than blood, and they covered her body in overlapping plates that looked harder than armor. Her wings were folded against her back, each one larger than a fighter ship. Her head was angular and sharp, with horns that curved back from her skull like weapons. Her eyes were worst of all. They glowed like molten gold, and when they fixed on Owen, he felt the weight of 8 centuries pressing down on him. You are small, she said. Your people are all small. Fragile things that break easily. You live for what, 70 years? 80 if you are lucky. I have ruled this empire for longer than your entire species has traveled the stars. Tell me, little human, why should I trust my life to something that will be dust before I have lived another century? Owen met her gaze and kept his voice level. Because, Your Majesty, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to help you. And right now you need help or I wouldn't be standing in this room. The silence that followed was absolute. Owen could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He had just spoken to an empress the way he spoke to any patient, and he had no idea if that would get him killed or get him listened to. Sirath leaned forward. The movement made her seem even larger. Her golden eyes narrowed. Bold words from something I could crush with one hand. She extended her right wing slightly, and Owen saw something that made his medical instincts override his survival instincts. The scales along her wing and shoulder were blackened and cracked. Some had fallen away entirely, revealing gray, dying tissue beneath. The pattern of decay was spreading inward toward her body. But perhaps bold is what I need. She settled back on her throne. Everyone else approaches me with fear. Fear makes doctors hesitate, and I do not have time for hesitation. She lifted one massive clawed hand and made a gesture. Owen heard doors closing somewhere behind him. When he glanced back, the throne room was empty except for the two of them. "You will examine me now," Sirath said. "You will tell me what is killing me. And if you waste my time with the same useless answers I have already heard, you will discover exactly how short a human life can be." Owen set down his medical case and opened it. His hands were steady. This was familiar ground now. Everything else was politics and fear. But this, the moment when doctor met patient, this he understood. "I'll need to ask you some questions," he said. "And I'll need to touch the affected area. With your permission." Sirath tilted her head slightly as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then, for the first time since he had entered the room, something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. "You may proceed, Dr. Owen Reed. Try not to disappoint me." Owen approached the throne with his scanner in hand. Each step brought him closer to something that could kill him before he could blink. But he had walked toward danger before. Every emergency room, every battlefield clinic, every plague ship carried the same risk. Medicine didn't stop being necessary just because it was dangerous. The necrosis was worse up close. The blackened scales crumbled at the edges like burnt paper. The tissue underneath had turned gray and lifeless. The pattern spread from her shoulder up along her wing in jagged lines that reminded Owen of lightning scars. The smell hit him when he got within arm's reach. It was the smell of dying flesh, something he had encountered too many times before. "When did this start?" Owen asked. He ran the scanner over the affected area without touching her yet. The device hummed softly as it collected data. 53 years ago. Sirath's voice was quieter now, less like thunder and more like distant storms. A small wound at first. It healed poorly. Then it began to spread. Slowly at first. Faster now. What caused the wound? A blade. She paused, and Owen sensed she was deciding how much to tell him. The Kelvorian rebels had one final weapon. A blade forged from metal they found in the deep mines of their sixth world. They said it could kill anything. I proved them wrong by surviving it. Owen moved his scanner along the edges of the necrosis. The readings made no sense. The tissue wasn't just dead. It was being actively poisoned by something the scanner couldn't identify. But you didn't heal from it. No. The word carried 8 centuries of pride forced to admit weakness. I did not. Your doctors tried to treat this. What did they do? Sirath flexed her claws against the armrest of her throne. The crystal made a grinding sound. Everything. Fire treatments to burn away the infection. Genetic therapy to force regeneration. Ancient healing rituals that have cured plagues. Nothing worked. The decay continues. 2 of my doctors swore they had found the answer. They were wrong. I do not tolerate being wrong when my life depends on being right. Owen filed that information away. He knelt down to get a better angle with his scanner. This close, he could see the individual scales on her underbelly, each one the size of his hand. He could feel the heat radiating from her body, far hotter than any human could survive. His shirt was soaked through now. May I touch the area? He asked. If you must. Owen pressed his fingers gently against the scales surrounding the necrosis. They were hard as stone and warm as heated metal. He moved his touch inward toward the blackened area. Sirath made a sound low in her throat that might have been pain or might have been a warning. Owen didn't stop. He pressed carefully against the dead tissue, feeling for something his scanner might have missed. There, deep under the surface, something that didn't belong, something hard and foreign embedded in tissue that should have healed around it or pushed it out. He pressed again in a slightly different spot. Same thing. Whatever had caused this wound had left pieces behind. The blade that cut you, Owen said, still focused on what he was feeling beneath the dead scales. Did it break? Sirath was silent for a long moment. Yes, the tip shattered when it struck bone. I thought nothing of it. Draconian bodies reject foreign material. We heal. We have always healed. Not from this. Owen stood and looked up at her. Meeting her eyes was still like looking into furnaces, but he needed her to understand what he was about to say. The metal from that blade is still inside you. It's been poisoning you for 53 years. Slowly. Your body couldn't push it out because it's embedded too deep. Your healing factor kept trying to close the wound over it, which just trapped the poison inside. Every treatment your doctors tried was treating the symptom, not the cause. Metal. Sirath's voice dropped to something dangerous. My physicians scanned for foreign objects. They found nothing. They scanned for biological threats, bacteria, viruses, genetic corruption. This metal is probably something your technology isn't calibrated to detect because your species never encountered it before. Owen pulled up the scanner readings and showed them to her, though he doubted she could interpret human medical displays. See these shadows in the deep tissue scan? That's what I'm feeling. Fragments of the blade, small enough that they wouldn't show up on a standard biological scan but large enough to be killing you. Sirath stared at the scanner, then at Owen, then at her own damaged wing. Her expression was unreadable, but her claws dug deeper into the armrest. If what you say is true, then the solution is to remove these fragments. Yes. Surgery. The word came out like a curse. You want to cut me open? It's the only way. Draconians do not submit to surgery. We are not prey animals to be carved apart. Our bodies heal themselves. That is our nature. That is our strength. Owen had expected this. Every species had cultural beliefs about medicine that sometimes worked against treatment. Humans had fought about blood transfusions once, about vaccines, about genetic therapy. Fear of the unknown was universal. Your nature is killing you right now, Owen said simply. I understand this goes against your beliefs. But beliefs don't change the fact that without intervention, this necrosis will reach your heart within 6 months, maybe less, and when it does, no amount of healing will save you. You cannot know that. I'm a trauma surgeon. I've spent 20 years cutting into people to save their lives. I know what untreated poison does to a body, no matter how strong that body is. I know what you're facing, and I know I can fix it, but only if you let me. Sirath rose from her throne. The movement was sudden and massive. She spread her wings, and even with one damage, the span was enormous. She loomed over Owen like a mountain, deciding whether to fall. You speak to me as though I am one of your human patients, as though my rank means nothing. Your rank means everything to your empire, Owen said. He didn't step back, didn't lower his eyes. But to medicine, you're a patient with a condition I can treat. Nothing more. Nothing less. I don't care if you're an empress or a factory worker. I care about keeping you alive. The throne room was silent except for the sound of Sirath's breathing. It was deep and slow, like wind moving through caves. Owen waited. This was the moment where she would either kill him or trust him. There was no middle ground. If I die on your table, Sirath said finally, your entire species will pay for it. Every human world, every ship, every colony. I will give the order before the surgery begins. If I do not survive to countermand it, my fleet will carry it out. Owen felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady. I understand. Do you? Do you understand what you are risking? Not just your own life, but billions of others? Yes. And I'm still standing here telling you this is what needs to be done. Because I'm a doctor, Your Majesty. Saving lives is what I do. Even when it's terrifying. Even when everything is at stake. Especially then. Sirath folded her wings slowly. She settled back onto her throne, and when she spoke again, her voice carried something Owen hadn't heard from her before. Not respect, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. Very well, Dr. Owen Reed, you will perform your surgery. But know this. If you fail, you will die knowing you doomed your people. That is the weight you have chosen to carry. Owen met her golden eyes one more time. I've been carrying weight like that for 20 years. One more patient won't break me. Then prepare your tools, human, and pray that your confidence is not misplaced. The palace chamber had been stripped bare and converted into something resembling an operating theater. Owen worked quickly, setting up equipment on tables that had been carved from stone 1,000 years ago. His surgical tools looked fragile and small in this space built for giants. Beth, the young nurse from the human diplomatic station, worked beside him in silence. Her hands shook slightly as she calibrated the monitoring equipment. Guards lined the walls, 12 of them, each one watching with eyes that promised death if anything went wrong. Owen tried not to think about them, tried not to think about the fleet orders that had already been transmitted, tried not to think about anything except the surgery ahead. Sirath entered the chamber without ceremony. She had dismissed her royal garments and now wore nothing but her scales. The necrosis looked even worse under the surgical lights Owen had set up. The blackened tissue seemed to pulse with its own corrupt life. "I have never done this before," Sirath said. She looked at the surgical table, which had been built large enough to accommodate her bulk. "Allowed myself to be vulnerable. Surgery isn't about being weak," Owen said as he scrubbed his hands in sterile solution. "It's about being smart enough to know when you need help." Sirath climbed onto the table. The movement was careful, almost hesitant. When she settled into position with her damaged wing extended, she looked less like an empress and more like what she was under all the power and fear. "A living being who was dying and knew it. The anesthesia might kill you," Owen said. He had explained this before, but he needed to say it again now. "Your metabolism is too different. Your body temperature is too high. I can't risk it. You need to stay conscious." "I will suppress my healing factor through meditation," Sirath said. "It will require complete focus. I will feel everything." Beth made a small sound of distress. Owen glanced at her and saw the question in her eyes. How could they do this? How could they cut into someone who would feel every slice, every probe, every extraction? Owen had asked himself the same question 100 times while preparing. The answer was always the same. Because the alternative was worse. "I'll work as fast as I can," Owen said. "But this is delicate. If I rush and hit the wrong nerve cluster or sever the wrong blood vessel, you could lose the use of your wing. Or worse, then do not rush." Sirath closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed and deepened. "Begin." Owen picked up the laser scalpel. His hands were steady now. They always were once the surgery started. Everything else fell away. The guards, the threats, the weight of species-level consequences. All of it vanished, and there was only the patient and the problem and the solution he needed to find. The scalpel cut through scale with a high-pitched whine. The material was harder than anything Owen had cut before. Smoke rose from the incision. Sirath's body tensed and a low sound came from deep in her throat, but she didn't move. Owen worked the scalpel deeper, through layer after layer of tissue that was nothing like human anatomy. Draconian blood was thick and hot. It didn't flow so much as seep. Beth used suction equipment to keep the incision clear. "How many fragments?" Sirath's voice was tight with pain. "At least 7 that I can detect, possibly more." Owen reached the first fragment and stopped. It was worse than he had thought. The metal had fused partially with her bone structure. Removing it would require cutting away some of the bone itself. This is going to hurt more. Everything hurts. Continue. Owen used a smaller tool to carefully separate the fragment from the surrounding tissue. Each movement had to be precise. Draconian nerves were larger than human nerves, but more densely packed. One wrong move and he could cause permanent damage. Sweat ran down his face. The chamber was too hot. His hands were slick inside his gloves. He blinked away the sweat and kept working. The first fragment came free. It was small, no larger than a grain of rice, but it gleamed with an oily darkness that suggested poison. Beth took it carefully with sterile tongs and placed it in a sealed container. 6 more to go. Owen moved to the second fragment. Then the third. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the surgery. Only the steady work of separating poison from flesh, death from life. Sirath's breathing grew more labored. Her body trembled with the effort of staying still, of suppressing instincts that screamed at her to move, to fight, to heal. "Talk to me," Owen said as he worked on the 4th fragment. "Tell me something, anything. It helps to focus on something other than the pain." "What would you have me say?" Sirath's voice was barely above a whisper now. "Tell me about something you love, something that makes this life worth saving." Silence. Owen worked deeper, finding the 4th fragment embedded near a major artery. He had to be more careful here. One slip and Sirath would bleed out faster than even her healing factor could manage. "There is an observatory," Sirath said finally, "at the top of the palace. I go there when I cannot sleep. I watch the stars being born in the celestial nebula. It takes 1,000,000 years for a star to form, but through the telescope I can see it happening. I have watched the same star cluster for 600 years. I have seen new lights appear where there was only darkness before." Owen extracted the 4th fragment. "That sounds beautiful. It is the only place where I do not feel the weight of rule, where I am not an empress, just a being who watches the universe unfold. Is that what you wanted? When you were young, before all this power?" "I wanted to explore, to see every world." to understand everything. Another tremor ran through her body. Then my predecessor was assassinated. The Empire needed strength. I gave them strength. I gave them fear. And somewhere in giving them what they needed, I lost what I wanted. Owen found the fifth fragment. This one was the largest, and it had spread hairline cracks through the bone around it. Removing it would be the most difficult yet. You can still explore. After this. After you heal, can I? Or have I become the thing I built? The tyrant who rules through terror? You're whoever you choose to be. Owen began the delicate work of extracting the fifth fragment. That's the thing about being alive. You get to keep choosing. The fragment came free. 2 more. Owen's hands were cramping. His back ached from bending over the table. Beth looked exhausted. But Sirath was still conscious, still focused, still holding herself perfectly still despite pain that would have broken most beings. The 6th fragment was buried deep, so deep that Owen had to cut through muscle tissue to reach it. Sirath made a sound then, something between a growl and a whimper. Her claws scraped against the stone table, but she held position. Almost there, Owen said. 1 more after this. I believe you. Those 3 words carried more weight than Owen expected. I believe you. From someone who had spent 800 years trusting no one. From someone who had killed doctors who failed her. I believe you. The 6th fragment came out. Owen's vision was blurring with sweat and exhaustion. Beth wiped his forehead with a cloth. He blinked and focused on the final fragment. It was the deepest one, closest to her heart, closest to killing her. Owen took a breath and began the last extraction. Sirath's breathing had gone ragged. Tell me something now, she whispered. Something about you. I had a daughter, Owen said as he worked. She died when she was 7. Genetic condition. I couldn't save her. That's why I became a surgeon. Why I kept pushing, kept learning, kept trying to solve the impossible problems. Because I failed once and I couldn't fail again. You carry your dead with you. We all do. The question is what we do with that weight. The final fragment resisted. It had fused more completely than any of the others. Owen had to make a choice. Cut deeper and risk hitting the major blood vessels near her heart, or leave it and let her die slowly. No choice at all, really. He cut deeper. The fragment came free. Sirath's body went rigid. Her healing factor, suppressed for so long, suddenly rushed back in. Owen pulled his tools clear as the incision began closing itself at a speed that should have been impossible. New tissue grew over exposed bone. New scales formed over raw flesh. Within minutes, the wound was sealed. Sirath's eyes opened. They still glowed gold, but something in them had changed. You did it! We did it! Owen stepped back from the table. His legs were shaking. How do you feel? Sirath sat up slowly. She extended her wing, the one that had been dying for 53 years. It spread fully, scales gleaming red in the surgical lights. No black necrosis. No dead tissue. Just living dragon. I feel, Sirath said softly, like I can breathe again. Owen smiled. Then his legs gave out and he sat down hard on the stone floor. Beth caught his shoulder to steady him. Around them, the guards lowered their weapons. The surgery was over. They had both survived. Owen watched the rain fall outside his window. The palace had given him quarters in the guest wing, rooms that were too large and too grand for someone who spent most of his life in small clinic spaces. 3 days had passed since the surgery, 3 days of waiting to learn whether he would live or die. Whether humanity would live or die. Beth brought him food twice a day. She said little, but her presence was a comfort. She was the only other human in the palace, maybe the only other human on the entire planet. Everyone else who served here was draconian, and they watched Owen with eyes that held calculation rather than hostility. He was no longer just the strange human doctor. He was the one who had saved their Empress. The door opened without warning. A guard stood there, one Owen recognized from the surgery. The Empress summons you. Come now. Owen followed the guard through corridors he didn't recognize. They didn't go to the throne room. Instead, they went up, climbing stairs that spiraled through the palace like the inside of a shell. They emerged onto a terrace garden that Owen hadn't known existed. Sirath stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out over her capital city. She wore simpler clothing now, something that looked almost practical. When she turned to face him, Owen saw that her scales had regained their luster. The wing that had been dying now moved with fluid grace. You look better, Owen said. I feel better, stronger than I have felt in half a century. Sirath gestured to a bench carved from dark wood. Sit, we need to talk. Owen sat. Sarath remained standing, which meant he had to look up at her, but somehow it felt less like a power play and more like habit. She was used to being the tallest thing in any room. "I owe you my life," Sarath said without preamble. "That is not something I say lightly or often. In 800 years, I have been in debt to perhaps 5 beings. You are now one of them. You don't owe me anything. I'm a doctor. Saving lives is what I do." "Yes, you said that before, and I have been thinking about those words." Sarath began to pace, her claws clicking softly against the stone. "You walked into my throne room knowing I could kill you. You spoke to me as an equal when I could have destroyed you for that insolence. You performed surgery on me knowing that if I died, your entire species would pay the price. Why? Because it was the right thing to do." The right thing. Sarath stopped pacing. "I have spent centuries doing what was necessary, not what was right. I conquered worlds because the Empire needed resources. I executed advisors because I needed others to fear me. I ruled through strength because I believed kindness was weakness. And look what it gained me: a throne, power, fear, and absolute loneliness." Owen heard something in her voice he hadn't expected. Regret. "You're 800 years old. Everyone you knew when you were young is gone, dead or driven away by what I became." Sarath looked at her hands, at the claws that had torn through enemies and allies alike. "During the surgery, when the pain was worst, you asked me to talk about something I loved. Do you remember what I told you?" "The observatory. Watching stars being born? Yes, that is the only place where I feel like myself. The self I was before I became this." She gestured at herself, at the palace, at the empire below. "I have been thinking about your question, about what I wanted before all this power. I wanted to explore, to learn, to understand the universe. Instead, I conquered it. It's not too late to change." Sarath laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I have made myself into a monster. You cannot simply stop being a monster because you have decided it is inconvenient. You're not a monster. You're a person who made hard choices in hard times. There's a difference." "Is there? I have destroyed worlds, Dr. Owen Reed. I have killed thousands. I have built an empire on fear. What person does that?" Owen thought about his answer carefully. "A person who was scared, who thought the only way to protect what mattered was to make everyone else more scared. But fear is exhausting. For everyone, including the person creating it." Sarath was quiet for a long moment. "My people are dying. Did you know that? Not from war or plague, from time. Draconian birth rates have fallen every century for the past 3,000 years. We live long, but we reproduce slowly. Each generation is smaller than the last. In another 2,000 years, there may be no Draconians left at all. Is that why you conquered the other species?" "Partly. We needed their worlds, their resources, their knowledge. I thought perhaps their science could solve what ours could not. But conquest breeds resentment, not cooperation. The species I have subjugated would celebrate if we vanished." Owen leaned forward. "Then stop subjugating them. Start cooperating instead." "You make it sound simple." "The concept is simple. The execution is hard. But here's what I know from medicine. When you approach a problem with force alone, sometimes you just make things worse. When you approach it with understanding, with cooperation, you find solutions you never expected. You are suggesting I transform an empire built on 800 years of fear into something else. That is impossible. You survived surgery that should have killed you. You're still alive after 53 years of slow poison. Impossible seems to be something you're good at surviving." Sarath tilted her head, studying him. "You speak with such confidence for someone so fragile. Humans are fragile. That's exactly why we learned to work together. We couldn't survive alone, so we built communities. We couldn't outfight predators, so we outthought them. Our weakness became our strength because we accepted it instead of hiding it. And you think I should do the same? Accept weakness? I think you should accept that strength has more than one definition. You proved that when you let me perform surgery. That took more courage than any battle." Sarath moved to the edge of the terrace again. The city spread below them, lights beginning to glow as evening approached. "My council will oppose any change. They have built their power on the current system. Lord Draken in particular will see any move toward cooperation as betrayal of everything we have built. Then you'll have to make them understand that the empire they've built is dying along with your species. Change or extinction. Those are the options." "You are very certain of this." "I'm certain that holding on to something that's killing you is the worst kind of pride. I just spent 3 days cutting poison out of your body. Don't let political poison do what that metal couldn't." Sarath turned back to face him. I am going to do something unprecedented. I am going to name you as the first non-draconian ambassador to this court. You will have full diplomatic status. You will advise me on medical matters and on how to begin this impossible transformation you suggest. Owen stood up quickly. Your Majesty, I'm not a diplomat. I'm a doctor. Exactly. You are not trained in politics or deception. You say what you believe is true. That is what I need. Someone who will tell me when I am wrong. Someone who sees me as a patient who needs healing, not an empress who must be appeased. Your council will hate this. Undoubtedly, Lord Dracon may challenge my decision directly. But I'm still Empress. My word is still law. And my word is that you will stay. Owen thought about his clinic back on New Terra, about the patients waiting for him, about the life he had built that was simple and clear and didn't involve empires or politics or species-level consequences. Then he thought about what Sarath had said, about a species slowly dying, about an empire built on fear that was consuming itself, about someone 800 years old who had forgotten what it felt like to have a friend instead of subjects. I'll stay, Owen said, but I'm keeping my medical practice open. I'm a doctor first, ambassador second. Agreed. Sarath extended her hand, the one with claws that could tear through steel. Owen took it carefully. Her grip was controlled, gentle despite the strength behind it. Thank you, Dr. Owen Reed, for saving my life, for giving me reason to value it again. Thank you for trusting me. Trust is not something I give easily. Remember that. And remember that it is a gift not to be wasted. They stood together on the terrace as darkness fell over the capital. Below them, the city that had been built on conquest began its evening routine, unaware that their empress had just chosen a path that would change everything. Unaware that a fragile human doctor had done what 800 years of power could not. He had given their ruler something to believe in besides fear. Somewhere in the palace, Lord Dracon was already planning his response. Somewhere in the diplomatic channels, word was spreading that a human had been named to the Draconian court. Somewhere the future was shifting towards something new and uncertain and possibly catastrophic. But for this moment, on this terrace, two beings from different worlds stood as equals, and that was enough to start with. The state dinner had been Lord Dracon's idea. A celebration of the Empress's recovery, he had called it. A chance to show the court that their ruler had returned to full strength. Owen should have known it was a trap. He had spent enough time in the palace over the past 2 weeks to recognize when Draconians were planning something. The way they watched him, the way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. The great hall blazed with light from 1,000 hanging crystals. Long tables stretched the length of the room, laden with food that Owen couldn't begin to identify. Draconians filled the hall, their scales catching the light like a sea of jewels. Owen sat at Sarath's right hand, a position of honor that made him more visible and more vulnerable than he had ever felt. Beth sat further down the table, looking uncomfortable in formal diplomatic clothing. She caught his eye and gave him a small smile that didn't hide her nervousness. Two humans among hundreds of dragons. Owen had suggested bringing more of the diplomatic staff, but Sarath had insisted the dinner was for inner court members only. Another sign he had missed. Lord Dracon sat across from them. He was smaller than Sarath, but broader, with scales that looked like they had been carved from coal. His eyes were orange rather than gold, and they had never left Owen since the dinner began. When he smiled, it showed too many teeth. To the Empress, Dracon raised his glass. The liquid inside glowed faintly blue. May her recovery remind us all of the strength of draconian blood. We do not need outsiders to heal us. We heal ourselves. The other Draconians raised their glasses. Owen noticed that not everyone drank. Some of the younger court members simply lowered their glasses after the toast, their expressions carefully neutral. Sarath's voice cut through the hall. My recovery reminds me that strength has many forms, Lord Dracon, including the strength to accept help when it is offered. Of course, Your Majesty. Dracon set his glass down with exaggerated care. Though I wonder what price we pay for this help. What promises have been made to the humans in exchange for this one doctor's services? No promises except continued peace between our peoples. Unless you suggest peace is too high a price. Owen felt the temperature in the room shift. Not literally, though the air did feel suddenly hotter. The tension was thick enough to choke on. He reached for his water glass and took a sip. The water tasted wrong, bitter. He set the glass down quickly, but he had already swallowed. His heart began to race. Not from fear. From something chemical. Something wrong spreading through his bloodstream. Dr. Reed? Sirath's attention snapped to him. What is it? The water. Owen's lips were going numb. His medical training kicked in, cataloging symptoms even as they overwhelmed him. Paralytic agent, fast-acting, meant for human metabolism. Poisoned! The hall erupted. Guards moved toward the table. Draconians rose from their seats, and then Owen saw them. 3 guards who should have been protecting Sirath instead drew weapons and moved toward her. Everything happened at once. Sirath rose with a roar that shook the crystals overhead. The 3 guards charged. Owen tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't respond. The poison was spreading faster than he had thought possible. He saw Beth trying to reach him, saw other guards moving to intercept the attackers, saw Draken sitting calmly in his seat watching. One of the attacking guards had a blade, curved and gleaming. Owen knew what it was meant to do, knew where it was aimed. Sirath was focused on the other 2 attackers, her attention split. She wouldn't see the blade until it was too late. Owen fell forward off his chair. The movement was clumsy, graceless, but it put him in the blade's path. The weapon hit him in the side, just below the ribs. The pain was immediate and absolute, hot and cold at the same time. Fire and ice. He fell to the floor and the world tilted sideways. Through dimming vision, he saw Sirath realize what had happened. Saw her face change from battle fury to something else. Something raw. She moved with a speed Owen hadn't seen before, hadn't thought possible. The attacking guards tried to flee. They didn't make it 3 steps. The hall filled with dragon fire. Real fire, not the controlled flames used for ceremony or cooking. This was the fire of rage, of something ancient and primal unleashed after centuries of control. The temperature spiked so high that humans would have died from the heat alone. The 3 attacking guards burned. Lord Draken tried to run. Sirath's claws caught him before he reached the door. She held him up with one hand, her claws wrapped around his throat. You did this. You poisoned him. You used my own guards against me. He weakened you, Draken choked out. Made you soft. The Empire needs strength, not sentiment. You know nothing of strength. Sirath's voice was cold despite the fire that still flickered along her scales. This human saved my life. He took a blade meant for me. He is dying because of his courage. What have you done in 8 centuries that equals that? She threw Draken to the ground. Guards surrounded him immediately. Sirath turned and dropped to her knees beside Owen. The movement was so sudden, so human in its panic that the watching court members gasped. Owen. Her claws retracted completely, leaving only her hands. She touched his face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from something so large. Stay with me. Do not leave. Owen tried to speak. His tongue was thick and useless. The poison had spread everywhere. His heart was slowing. He could feel it losing rhythm, missing beats. This was what dying felt like. He had watched others die, had fought to save them. Now he was the one slipping away. Beth appeared beside them. She had Owen's medical kit from somewhere. Her hands shook as she tried to find something, anything that would counteract the poison, but they didn't know what the poison was. Didn't have time to analyze it, didn't have the equipment to synthesize an antidote. We need human doctors, Beth said. Her voice broke. We need a medical ship. We need equipment we don't have. Wait, how long? Sirath demanded. Minutes, maybe less. Sirath looked down at Owen. Her golden eyes were wide. For the first time since he had met her, she looked afraid. I will not let you die. Not like this. Not for me. She placed her hands on Owen's chest. Her scales began to glow. Heat radiated from her, but it wasn't the burning heat of fire. It was something else. Something older. Energy flowed from her into him, and Owen felt his heart stutter and then beat again. Felt his lungs expand. Felt the poison burning away under an onslaught of something that his human biology shouldn't have been able to withstand. The pain faded. His vision cleared. He took a breath that felt like the first breath of his life. Sirath collapsed forward, her hand still on his chest. The glow faded from her scales. Around them, the court watched in absolute silence. What had just happened was impossible. Against every rule of biology and magic that the Draconians knew. She had bonded with him. Life to life. Dragon to human. Something that had never been done. Never even been attempted. What did you do? Owen whispered. Sirath raised her head. She looked exhausted but alive. They both were. I gave you what you gave me. A chance to keep living. And now we are bound together. I will feel your presence for the rest of my days. When you die, I will know. And I will mourn you for centuries after. Why? Because you are my friend. And I have gone 800 years without one. I will not lose you now. Guards lifted Draken from the floor. He stared at Sirath with something like horror. You have doomed us all. A dragon bonding with a human. It is unnatural. It is wrong. No. Sirath stood, pulling Owen up with her. He was shaky but alive. Impossibly alive. What was wrong was building an empire on fear. What was wrong was believing that strength means standing alone. This human has shown me more courage in 2 weeks than you have shown in 3 centuries. If that is unnatural, then nature has been teaching us the wrong lessons. She addressed the entire hall. Lord Drakon will be stripped of his title and his lands. He will be exiled to the outer territories. Let it be known that mercy is not weakness. Let it be known that a new age begins tonight. An age where we build bridges instead of walls. Where we find allies instead of subjects. Sirath looked down at Owen. If you can forgive me for nearly getting you killed. Owen managed a weak smile. I'm a doctor. I've had worse nights. Not many, but a few. The hall remained silent. Then slowly one of the younger Draconians began to clap. Then another, then more. Not everyone joined in. Many stood frozen, uncertain of what they were witnessing, but enough applauded that the sound filled the great hall. Change had come to the Draconian Empire. Born in blood and poison and fire. Born in the moment when an Empress chose friendship over fear. When a human doctor threw himself in front of a blade to save someone who could have destroyed his entire species. The old order was dying. Something new was being born, and like all births, it was messy and painful and uncertain, but it was alive. Recovery took longer this time, not because the wound was worse than the surgery had been, but because Owen's body was trying to understand what had happened to it. Draconian life energy flowing through human veins. The bond that Sirath had created was unlike anything human medicine had ever documented. Owen could feel her presence now, like a second heartbeat just out of sync with his own. When she was near, the feeling grew stronger. When she was far away, it faded to a whisper but never disappeared completely. The palace physicians were fascinated and terrified. They ran tests that Owen barely understood, using equipment that combined draconian technology with hastily adapted human medical scanners. The results showed that his cellular structure had been altered at a fundamental level. He would live longer than a normal human now. Decades longer, perhaps, but he would still die centuries before Sirath did. The bond didn't make him immortal. It just delayed the inevitable. How does it feel? Beth asked him one morning. She was preparing to return to the diplomatic station. Her temporary assignment had stretched into 3 weeks, and her superiors were demanding she come back. Knowing she'll feel it when you die? Heavy, Owen admitted. He sat on the balcony of his quarters, watching the city wake up below. Like I'm carrying a grief that hasn't happened yet. But she chose it. She knew the cost and did it anyway. She loves you. You know that, right? Not like that. It's something different. Something I don't think humans have a word for. Maybe you'll invent one. Beth smiled. You've already invented a lot of things. First human to save a dragon empress. First human to be bonded to one. First human ambassador to the Draconian court. You're collecting firsts like other people collect stamps. Owen laughed, then winced as his healing ribs protested. I just wanted to be a doctor. This wasn't part of the plan. The best things never are. After Beth left, Owen made his way to the council chamber. Sirath had summoned him to attend the first session of what she was calling the Alliance Council. Representatives from the 3 conquered species would be there. The Kelvorians, whose weapon had nearly killed Sirath 53 years ago. The Tarthans, who had fought a brutal war against Draconian expansion 2 centuries back. The Sentinels, whose fleet had been broken in a battle that was still taught in military academies. Owen arrived early and found Sirath already there. She stood at the window looking out at nothing. When she sensed him enter, she turned. The bond worked both ways. She always knew when he was near now. Are you nervous? Owen asked, terrified. Sirath moved away from the window. I am about to give power to species I have spent centuries dominating. I am about to admit that the empire I built was wrong in its foundations. How does one do that without destroying everything? Carefully, honestly, and by accepting that you'll make mistakes along the way. That is not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Change is never comfortable. Owen moved to stand beside her. But you're doing the right thing. Even if it's hard. The scholars are still studying what happened at the dinner. They say our bond should be impossible. Different species cannot share life energy that way. It goes against everything they know about biology and magic. Good. Maybe they'll learn something new. Sirath tilted her head, studying him. You are remarkably calm about having your entire biological structure altered. I died. You brought me back. Everything else is just details. Owen paused. Though I am curious about one thing. Why did you do it? You could have let me go. Found another advisor. Because I have lived 800 years surrounded by people who feared me, who obeyed me, who served me. But you looked at me like I was just another patient who needed help. And when the blade came for me, you threw yourself in its path without hesitation. How could I do less for you? The chamber doors opened before Owen could respond. The representatives began to file in. They moved carefully, watching the guards who lined the walls. Watching Sirath, who had destroyed so many of their worlds. Watching Owen, the human who had somehow changed her. The Kelvorian representative was an older female with gray skin and 3 eyes. She had fought in the rebellion that Sirath had crushed. The Tarthan representative was young, barely out of adolescence by their standards, but his people trusted him to speak for them. The Sentinel was massive and crystalline, communicating through modulated light pulses that a translator converted to speech. They all sat at the circular table that had been installed specifically for this meeting. No head of the table, no position of dominance, just a circle where everyone was equal. Sirath remained standing. I have called you here to discuss the end of the Empire. The representatives looked at each other. The Kelvorian spoke first. You are disbanding your empire? I am transforming it into an alliance, where each species maintains sovereignty over their own worlds, where we work together instead of you working for me. Why? The Tarthan's voice was suspicious. What do you gain from this? Survival. My people are dying out slowly, inevitably. We need your help. But more than that, I have learned that ruling through fear is no ruling at all. It is simply waiting for the next rebellion, the next assassination attempt, the next war. I am tired of waiting. The Sentinel's light pulsed in patterns that the translator struggled to interpret. Finally, it settled on words. You ask us to trust the one who destroyed our fleet, who burned our colonies, who killed thousands of our people. No, I ask you to trust that I have changed, that Dr. Owen Reed has shown me there is a better way, that you have a chance to build something new from the ashes of something old and broken. The Kelvorian leaned forward. What guarantee do we have that this is not another trap? Another way to control us? Owen spoke for the first time. None, you have no guarantee. That's what trust means. It's a risk. But here's what I know. 3 weeks ago, Sirath nearly died. I saved her. A week ago, I nearly died. She saved me. We're bonded now in a way that no one fully understands. If she was going to betray you, she wouldn't have bonded herself to a human who believes in cooperation. She wouldn't have stripped her most powerful council member of his title for trying to maintain the old ways. She wouldn't be sitting here asking you to help build something new. A human speaks for the Empress now? The Tarthan sounded offended. A friend speaks for a friend, Sirath corrected. And if you cannot accept that a dragon and a human can be friends, then perhaps you are not ready for the alliance I propose. Silence filled the chamber. Owen could feel Sirath's nervousness through the bond, could feel her fighting the urge to fall back on threats and power. This was the moment. Either they chose to trust or this ended before it began. The Kelvorian stood. She moved slowly, her 3 eyes never leaving Sirath. When she reached the Dragon Empress, she extended her hand. My name is Vera. I fought in the rebellion. I lost my brother to your fire. But I see something in you now that I did not see then. Perhaps it is madness. Perhaps it is hope. I choose to believe it is hope. Sirath took her hand carefully. I cannot undo what I did. I can only promise to do better. That is all any of us can do. The Tarthan stood next. Then the Sentinel. One by one they approached Sirath. Not to bow, not to submit, but to shake her hand as equals. The alliance was born in that moment. Not perfect, not complete, but alive and possible. Over the following weeks, the work began. Draconian scientists shared their knowledge with Kelvorian researchers. Tarthan engineers helped design new stations in neutral space. The Sentinels opened their archives, revealing technologies they had kept hidden during the occupation. And slowly, carefully, the species that had been enemies began to learn how to be partners. Owen worked alongside them all. His medical knowledge helped solve problems no one had thought to connect. Human adaptability became a bridge between different ways of thinking. The bond between him and Sirath became a symbol of what was possible when beings from different worlds chose to understand each other. 6 months after the surgery that had saved her life, Sirath stood in her observatory. Owen joined her there, as he often did now. They watched the celestial nebula together. seeing stars being born in the ancient dust. Do you regret it? Sarath asked quietly. The bond, the changes to your life. You could have gone home to your clinic, to your people. Instead, you are here tied to me until you die. Owen thought about his answer. I regret nothing. You gave me a second chance at life. I'm using it to help build something that might last longer than either of us. What more could a doctor ask for? To heal people. That is what doctors do. I am healing people, just on a larger scale than I expected, he smiled. Besides, you're not so bad once someone gets past the fire-breathing and world-conquering. Sirath made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are the only being in existence who would say that to my face. Someone has to keep you humble. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the universe unfold. Below them, the capital city that had once been the heart of an empire was transforming into something new. Embassies were being built. Trade routes were being established. Species that had been conquered were becoming citizens. It wasn't perfect. There were still those who resisted. Still violence in the outer systems. Still prejudice and fear and hatred that would take generations to heal. But it was better than it had been. And tomorrow would be better than today. That was what Owen had learned in his years as a doctor. Healing wasn't instant. It was slow and painful and required patience. But it was always worth the effort. Thank you, Sarath said finally. For everything. For saving my life. For showing me there was a life worth saving. For being my friend when I had forgotten what friendship meant. Owen reached out and placed his hand on her arm. Through the bond, he felt what she felt. Gratitude, hope. Fear of the future mixed with determination to face it. And underneath it all, something that felt like peace. Thank you for trusting me, he said. And for teaching me that even monsters can change. Mostly because they were never really monsters at all. Just people who forgot how to be anything else. Above them, a new star ignited in the nebula, a point of light where there had been darkness. It would burn for millions of years long after Owen was gone. Long after even Sirath had faded into history. But the alliance they had built would remain. Imperfect and difficult and worth every struggle. A testament to the moment when a doctor and an empress chose compassion over fear. When a human and a dragon became friends. When the galaxy learned that strength wasn't about domination, but about the courage to change. The future spread before them uncertain and bright. And for the first time in 800 years, Sirath looked forward to seeing it unfold.